Dad, please don't hit Mom, Sarah pleaded with her father, but it was like he didn't even hear her. He raised his hand again and hit the woman, covering her face with her hands. Sarah jumped in between her mother and father. The blow fell on her face instead of her mother's. She was thrown to the side. She screamed in pain. "You, go to your bloody room!" Her father screamed at her in a fury. Then he kept glaring at both of the helpless, crying women. He did not like that his blow fell on his daughter, but he did not want to admit that at that moment. Sarah kept sobbing while repeating to him not to hit her mother. His anger died down a little at the sight of Sarah. He stormed off to his room. Mother quickly went and hugged Sarah. Then she helped her get up. She assured her it was a mistake that her father hit Sarah and he would never intentionally hit his daughter. She scolded Sarah for jumping in between them. They went to Sarah's room and she tucked her in. Sarah's mother talked to her for a while, trying to calm her down and reassure her that everything was going to be okay. After a time, Sarah fell asleep. Sarah saw a nightmare of her father screaming at her mother loudly. Then he slapped her and raised his hand to slap her again. As he swung his hand, Sarah jumped in between them again. She woke up startled by the nightmare. She knew it was just a nightmare, but Sarah was extremely broken up about what happened. She firmly believed that her father was going to hit her mother again. What she thought was right. It happened again and again. Sarah's father was not like that when she was little. He loved Sarah's mother and her a lot. She could not understand the reason for his difference. Quarrels happened almost every day, but he didn't hit Sarah's mother every day. However, it never stopped as well. One day after a huge fight and beating his wife, Sarah's father went away. That day, Sarah's mother told Sarah something Sarah could never even have thought possible. She told Sarah that her father was having an affair with another woman. Sarah was shocked. She could not believe her ears. How could he do that? She asked her mother. She told Sarah not to worry, that he promised to continue to provide for them. He did not want to divorce his wife. He just wanted to have a second relationship with a younger woman. It hurt Sarah a lot to even think that her father could do something so casually. After that conversation, Sarah thought a lot about what her mother said. Then it clicked in her mind. Her father had not divorced her mother because he would have to give her half of his wealth if he did. Instead, it was easier for him to push her to the side to make room for his mistress. But what if the woman wanted to marry him? Then it hit her. What if Dad decided to remove her mother from the picture? What if he killed her? To her troubled mind, the thought seemed possible. From that day, she stopped doing all extracurricular activities in school. She was a great swimmer, and she also played table tennis. She stopped doing all of it. She made many excuses to stay at home instead of going to school, not because she wanted to skip school, but to ensure her mother was safe. She would not leave her mother's side when her father was at home. Sarah's grades fell drastically. She withdrew from her friends. Teachers asked her what the problem was, but she always told them everything was okay. Her best friend Emily also tried to talk to her and find out what was happening with her. "Hi, Sarah dear, can we just talk a little? We haven't had a chat in days," Emily told Sarah, desperate to connect back with her friend. But Sarah just pushed her away as well. "Oh, hi, Emily. Can we talk later? I'm kind of busy right now. I will come to talk to you for sure," Sarah would say every time Emily tried to connect with her. Emily was very hurt, but she could not do anything since Sarah did not let anyone help her. No one knew how even to start to help her. She did not trust anyone. If her dad somehow learned that she knew of her plan, he might decide to be quick with his plan to murder her mother, but it was a huge burden to her. She felt that it was taking a heavy toll on her mental health. She wanted to talk to someone about it, but she could not trust anyone. After a few weeks, she decided to talk with someone because she felt she might go crazy if she did not immediately. One of the teachers who taught her class was an understanding person. She always listened to students well and was kind to everyone. She was the only teacher Sarah could say she loved. One day during lunch, Sarah asked the kind teacher if she could talk with her. The kind teacher understood that Sarah had something personal to talk about. She asked Sarah to come to the library with her. The library was deserted. It was the best place to talk privately. They went to the end of the library so they could see if anyone had come into the library. Then the kind teacher asked Sarah, "What is going on, dear?" At the teacher's kind words, Sarah poured everything in her heart out to the kind woman who listened to her. Sarah told her why she was absent a lot because she wanted to protect her mother. "My father will not be with us much longer, teacher. He would leave one day and not come back to us. So I have only my mom as now a teacher. She is everything to me, so I will do everything to protect her. That's why I cannot leave her side. Even now, I am scared that she is alone at home," Sarah told her emotionally. As Sarah talked more to the teacher, she understood that the teen was in depression. She spoke with the student kindly and very carefully, but Sarah did not change what she thought. The teacher believed that the school counselor might be a better person to find a solution for Sarah's condition. She told Sarah it would help her if she could talk to the school counselor. "Don't worry, Sarah. I will come with you. She has more experience dealing with this kind of situation." The teacher tried to explain to Sarah, but she was not taking it. "No, teacher, I don't trust anyone other than you. Only you can keep my secret. Please don't tell anyone else of this. I beg you." She repeated again and again not to tell what she said to anyone. The teacher was afraid for the teen. If Sarah did not receive treatment for her depression, she might even get suicidal. So she was distraught when she was absent the next day. She tried to contact her mother, but the number was not working. After school, she went to the address the student was registered to in school. A woman answered the door. "Hi, how can I help you?" The teacher asked her if this was Sarah's home. The woman answered that it was and said she was Sarah's mother. "I am a teacher from Sarah's school. I just came here to check how she was. Can I also talk with you for a bit?" The teacher introduced herself, and the mother invited her into the house. She said Sarah was not feeling well, so she did not come to school. She was curious as to why a teacher visited to check upon Sarah. The kind teacher carefully told the mother about her daughter's situation. The mother was tearful when she heard it all. She did not talk, but started sobbing. The teacher touched her shoulder and asked whether or not it would be better if they talked to the police regarding her husband's violence to her. But then, much to the teacher's surprise, the woman laughed between the sob. What she told the teacher surprised the teacher. Her husband had hit her only once, for which he immediately apologized. It was true that they quarreled and that he had a mistress, but they were already meeting with a marriage counselor to sort things out. Much to the teacher's relief, she said they are improving their relationship. Her husband had been under a lot of pressure at his workplace, which made him cranky. But he had already given the company notice so he could move on to a position with better work-life balance in a different company. He had been applying for jobs in other companies for a few weeks. He had received reasonable offers from some of them as well, so that problem will be resolved very soon. The teacher said that it is essential that they take Sarah to a good psychiatrist as soon as possible. Sarah's mother thanked her a lot for telling her all of it. She could not believe she did not see what Sarah was going through. She assumed that Sarah heard bits and pieces of her and her husband's arguments and built a story in her head. It was also possible she saw some nightmares and believed they were real. The teacher asked her to update Sarah's condition when there was anything new. The teacher returned after that. Sarah's mother talked to Sarah once she was better. She agreed to speak to a psychiatrist. They made an appointment without delay and visited an experienced psychiatrist. The psychiatrist talked with them and arranged several follow-up sessions as well. She knew the exact correct way to speak to Sarah, so that Sarah did not get scared but was willing to coordinate with her. Sarah made a rapid recovery. Soon, Sarah started to get well, and she was ready to return to school. The teacher was happy to see Sarah back in the class after a couple of days. Sarah came and thanked her for talking to her mother. Sarah's mother called her and updated her on Sarah's progress. Her grades were climbing again. She was friends with everyone again. Emily was happy that her best friend was back. Since her parents were happy together again, Sarah had nothing to worry about. She quickly recovered fully. The teacher was delighted that she was able to help her student. Sarah started playing table tennis again. She was a very skilled player. Soon, she was selected for a tournament. The teacher went to see the game to support her. The teacher noticed that Sarah's parents had come to support their daughter at the matches. She was relieved to see that everything was fine between them now. Sarah skillfully played and won the championship. After that, she saw the three of them hugging each other. She smiled quietly and went on her way. Her name is Sarah. She is an 8-year-old happy, vibrant kid born into a middle-income family in Illinois. Her childhood was much like everyone else's in the beginning. When her grandmother was still living, Sarah was always a happy child. When she was 4, she could memorize essential histories and quickly do her classwork. Her grandmama died when she was 5. Her story started to change after this incident. The teachers knew Sarah as a vibrant child who always beams with a great smile and a genuine hard-working spirit. She was active, playing with her mates, laughing at jokes, and making the best of everything. No dull moments for Sarah. She was a curious and passionate kid. When Sarah was 7, she returned from school one day and saw a stray dog bugging beside a tree. She took pity on the poor dog and took her home. Her dad was at home when she returned with the stray dog. He never flinched at the gesture, but told Sarah to take care of it herself, and if it died, she should bury it herself. Sarah nurtured the sickly dog back to health. She named the dog Jimmy, and this canine became a close friend to Sarah. She fed the dog a small portion of her food and moved around wherever she was. Everyone in the neighborhood called them the little inseparable duo. Jimmy was about 8 months old when Sarah saved her from the streets. Sarah's dad was an absent father, and her mom, who was never always at home, got sacked from her job due to conduct. She stayed more at home. Her presence was supposed to be great for Sarah's little charmer, but the reverse was the case. Sarah's mom is Jennifer Thompson, while her dad is Rich Thompson. Sarah's mom started to giving her tasks that were clearly beyond her age. In time, Sarah's mom warned her never to feed her dog in her presence. She said seeing her feed the dog as a child irritates her. When Sarah was 8, her mom became more frustrated. Her attitude became terrible, and she resorted to physical beatings and mental abuse. For any mistakes, the mom always reminded her that she would get the worst beating of her life if she repeated it. The day Sarah broke a ceramic plate, her mother pushed her into an electric fence, and she watched as she writhed on the ground, groaning and in agony. That day, when Sarah's dad came home in the evening, he was unhappy with the bruises he saw on Sarah's torso, but he never made any difference. He is an alcoholic and a dysfunctional father. After the weekend, Sarah left for school and returned in the afternoon. She usually feeds her dog before leaving for school, and a neighbor provides Jimmy at noon. 1 week after the electric fence incident, Sarah went to get her hair done. She didn't take her dog along because of heavy traffic and was going with a friend. When she returned, she found her precious dog dead in the backyard. Sarah cried her soul out and groaned for hours. She proceeded to ask her mother what had happened. Her mother blatantly told her that her dog Jimmy sniffed her food, so she hit it with a rod and killed the animal for contaminating her food. She killed the animal cruelly just for her cruel enjoyment and satisfaction. She has always been picking on the dog for no just cause. Sarah writhed in pain and kept hoping that Jimmy would breathe again. The poor dog suffered a blunt injury and brain damage and died. No one would have guessed the mother could do such a cruel thing to a needy pet. Poor Sarah mourned her dog and never tasted anything throughout that day. Sarah started recounting her early childhood and remembered that her mother had never said, "I love you," to her. She has never felt her arms, nor has she wrapped her arms around her mother, even to give the slightest motherly embrace. Sarah has made conscious efforts as a child to get close to her mother, but her mother kept putting her off and declining any physicals. Her late grandmother was the only mother she had. The evil woman moved from bad to worse about a month after the last incident. She became a heavy alcoholic, neglecting her child's basic needs, and made serious attempts to shun her from complaining anything to her. She always referred her to meet her father or whomever she wanted. Though a vibrant child, Sarah started to lose her vibrancy, especially after losing her pet. Her bond with this little pet was massive. She missed her pet but suppressed many emotions because crying worsened the punishments. She started feeling very scared of her mother and was never close to her dad. The dad was absent, never gave any fatherly love, and was a heavy drunkard. Hence, she wasn't close to him to begin with. Over the past few months, the alcoholic evil mother started worse psychological, physical, and sexual abuses. Sarah didn't complain to anyone because she always warned her that she would kill her the same way she killed her little dog if she complained. Sarah's mom locked her up in the closet at any slightest unwarranted provocation. Her hands and feet were bound with handkerchiefs, and she was forced to stay there for hours. When Sarah started weeping, the mother would pull out a belt with buckles and use this belt to beat Sarah in her torso, back, and buttocks. The continuous beating suffered over every minor error left scars on her body. Sarah became increasingly afraid of everything and tried reporting the incident to her daddy. When Sarah's mother got wind of this, she did the worst. As usual, her mother bound her hands. This time, she didn't leave her there to writhe in pain. Instead, she used her nails to pinch Sarah's vagina. It was so painful that Sarah was shouting. She gagged her mouth and threatened to throw her from the stairs if she kept trying to scream. Sarah's mom's face was that of a satisfied villain who tortures her enemies. After the pinching, she told Sarah that she was doing this to her because she tried to report her mother to her father. That was her punishment for daring to write to anyone. Mrs. Jennifer started having many adulterous affairs in the house, even when her daughter was around. On one of the days, Sarah returned early from school and refused to greet her lover out of annoyance. She beat her up for disrespect and warned Sarah to be submissive to her lovers. She also told Sarah that she had no right to get mad, complain, or try funny moves. She understood that she owned her and would correct her if she deemed fit. She had never hit her in the face before all these physical abuses. Sarah thought it was because she had a pretty face, but she avoided the beginning so that an outsider wouldn't notice the physical abuse. She wanted to conceal all evidence of torture and abuse. The mental, physical, and sexual mistreatment got so deep into Sarah that one of her teachers noticed a bruise on her leg. Sarah denied it and said she sustained an injury during games. During Christmas, Mr. Rich, the absent dad, got Sarah some clothes. The man didn't get any gifts for his wife. This kind gesture showed towards Sarah infuriated Sarah's mom, and she started cooking plans for it. She believed that the clothes were a mistake for Sarah. She took her to the showers and made her stay there with the new clothes while she bathed. She presented her with a nasty naked doll out of the dumpster and forced Sarah to use it as her Christmas present. She blatantly told her that she never wanted her and wished she had died in childbirth. The mistreatments continued, and Sarah kept bottling up the problems. Sarah is 10 years old, but the abuses have increased tenfold. When Sarah dumped the naked doll, she made a severe case from it. A few days after the naked doll incident, Sarah's mother humiliated her again with emotional and physical abuse. She started by threatening Sarah with fear of beating her to a stupor and repressed her with all abusive memories. One time, she hit her head with a golf club. Sarah was starved that day because she forgot to turn off the gas in the kitchen. The years of physical and mental abuse took away Sarah's vibrancy. She started feeling horrific all the time and would burst out into extreme tears when sleeping. Her life became traumatized and hellish. The abuses never stopped, even with the heartbreaking nightmares. Sarah started avoiding going home after school. She loved staying in school, even after the class, and would go home when everyone had left. The teacher in charge of her grade noticed this awkward attitude, but couldn't place many worries on it. Some lads played until it was time to leave school, hence, she didn't see it as a big deal. These horrific acts happened until Sarah was 12 years. It worsened in the past year, and the repercussions have plagued Sarah's life for the past 9 months. She entered a state of psyche limbo and had no courage to report to authorities. The abuses have been mostly indoors, but Sarah's mother started showing increasingly erratic behaviors due to her narcotic and alcohol misuse. Unfortunately, Sarah kept bottling up all their emotions and putting up a brutal facade, face, and smiles. Everyone around her never knew the hell she was in or the pain she had been masking. She masked it very well, but her subconsciousness still disturbed her. Before the Easter season, Sarah's school usually had an annual Parents and Teachers Association meeting, PTA. Every child must have a representative. Sarah's mom was to represent her because her father had been away for about 3 months. Sarah's mother, Jennifer, anxiously wanted to be in the meeting because she feared her daughter might reveal some of her secrets during the session. In the meeting, every parent sat with their kids or wards. Sarah was sitting with her mother, but the body language was slightly off and unnatural. In attendance were some of the bigwigs in child abuse and molestation struggles. Physically, other children had that motherly warmth, fatherly embrace and love. Sarah's mom tried to put up an act, but her daughter seemed visibly uncomfortable and uneasy. Sarah was disappointed that no one could understand her suffering. She became restless because she thought her tormentor might abuse and torture her after the meeting. Nothing unusual happened during the meeting, but one of the staff took cognizance of their disjoint attitude toward Sarah. The officer for child welfare went up to Sarah's teacher and tried to inquire how she had been faring. Sarah's immediate class teacher gave positive reports on her academic performance and remarked that her grades had dropped over the past few months. The child welfare officer became curious about the cause and asked the teacher to self-examine Sarah with utmost privacy. The teacher agreed to do that and called Sarah the following day to ask her if everything was all right. Sarah wanted to open up, but her mother's threats were too heavy and new in her mind. She was too scared to alter any sentence implicating her mother because the mom had threatened that she would murder her if she ever complained to anyone about what happened in the house. The teacher, sensing hidden dangers in Sarah's face, decided to do a personal self-examination. She called a nurse to come and examine Sarah. The nurse didn't see signs of abuse on the face region, but proceeded to explore her inner body parts. The nurse saw scar marks on her lower back region and a pinch mark on her private area. The nurse asked what caused this pinch mark. Sarah didn't respond. The teacher and the nurse assured Sarah that no harm would come to her and promised to take her out of that house if she told the truth. At this point, Sarah has gotten unique assurance and decided to open up. "It was my mother that pinched me there. That is why that place has a dark mark," Sarah said. At first, the nurse was taken aback and thought Sarah talked gibberish. The nurse was bewildered and asked for clarification again. "Your mother did this to you?" Sarah replied, "Yes, my mother did that to me and has not stopped either." She opened up and told them what had been happening. She also revealed the verbal abuse, other physical abuse sites, and the emotional abuses she has been giving out to her ever since her grandmother died. The nurse burst out into tears and went out to get someone. Within a few minutes, she returned with a team from child welfare. They came into the room where Sarah was being examined and interviewed. They took pictures of her scarred body parts and called her to join them in their vehicle. They also took recordings when Sarah was narrating stories of how she threw lamps at her, punched her stomach, pinched her down there, bound her tiny hands, and how she also hit her with a golf club once. Their faces were filled with bewilderment and anger, and they asked her to direct them straight to their house. Sarah knew that exact direction to their home, so locating it was pretty simple. The human rights activities and child welfare were bashed into the house. Sarah's mom was arrested. They searched the house, and in her possession, they also found wraps of narcotics and other contraband drugs. She was whisked away, and Sarah was taken to a rehab center. Sarah's dad was also arrested on accounts of negligence and abuse. The good people of the Child's Care Support helped Sarah get back to her usual self. A loving and wealthy family later adopted her. Following 6 months of trials, the couple was sentenced to 14 years and 3 years imprisonment, respectively. Exactly 6 years after the incident, Sarah has regained her self-esteem and now schools in a prestigious high school in the States. She adopted a pet dog named after her former dog, Jimmy. Sarah was determined and later became a speaker for survivors, CPS workers, and children's welfare units. She became a successful therapist by profession and has been putting smiles on faces of others. Her horrible history turned into a storyline of her present colorful life. She uses herself to motivate, encourage, and educate people who survived or are battling abuse. Sarah got married at 32 and now has a lovely family. Annie is a 15-year-old high school girl studying at Kingston College. She is from an impoverished background. At her age, she has to do some dirty jobs to support her parent, who finds it hard to afford some basic needs. Annie's father was a medium-income gardener, but a fire incident and an economic crisis crippled the family's resources. Despite her poor background and physical appearance, Annie has always been a good influence. She has a scar on her face. The spot was an injury sustained during the fire breakout. She was saved from the fire, but the scar on her face is indelible. The family can't afford cosmetic surgery for the spot. In the slum of the city where they lived, Annie would gather fruit nuts from her daddy's farm and give them to beggar immigrants' children whom she thinks she is better than. She has always been optimistic about life and helps her poor dad in his garden. She is super independent for her age. At 14, she passed the grade exams and was poised to enter college. She applied for scholarships and got lucky with one. A famous firm that offers scholarships to less privileged children picked Annie as one of the kids to be offered admission. The criteria were based on her excellent grades in the elementary STEM exams. It was a day of great joy when she received her scholarship papers to start studying. Annie's father cried when he saw his daughter dressed for high school on the first day. Annie started school and did quite well in both class and extramural activities. The poor students always left with the school bus because of financial constraints and trekked home when the school bus dropped them at the bus terminal. Annie enjoyed this gesture and never missed the opportunity. One of these days in school, one popular bully took great interest in Annie. Peter approached Annie during recreation and wanted to know her name, age, and where she lived. Annie told him her name and age, but didn't reveal her house address. Peter picked up on this and insulted her for being physically deprived despite her age. He called Annie Scars Face Jerry. Jerry stands for the famous cartoon character in Tom and Jerry series, while the scar is because of the mark on Annie's face. It was an awful day for Annie. She had never been insulted in such a manner before. She left the scene and started walking away from Peter. The bully, Peter, kept walking alongside her and talking down on her. Bran, one of Annie's schoolmates, saw what had happened. He started coming towards Annie. Peter left when he sighted him. Bran met Annie and tried to inquire what was happening. Annie told him what had happened, but got an unexpected reply. Brand said, "I know you look poor, but to have a scarred face on top of poverty is a nasty combination. I hope you get past the insults." These words were cruel and heavy on little Annie. She got home and cried bitterly. She never complained about these issues to her dad because attending such a prestigious institution was a dream come true for the poor gardener. Peter always had the newest, best, and most expensive everything. He is from a wealthy family, and his parents were significant contributors to the school's social welfare department. Another day in school, he lurked around until he spotted Annie, where she was sitting on the veranda. He walked up to her and bragged about his family's wealth, his newest belt, shoes, and Swiss account for his holidays. He was so mean and kept calling her Scarface Jerry. Annie stood up from where she was sitting and wanted to leave. The bully boy smirked and told her that her family was like an ant on the earth's surface. She could go on and report him to authorities. Still, nobody could do anything because she has no evidence, and her family is his immunity over any bullshit. These words dampened Annie's heart and hope. As a young girl, she has never enjoyed the privileges of a fair society, and she believes that reporting to authorities won't change her situation. In the worst-case scenario, the boy has a crew of friends. They could lie against her, and she could lose her scholarship. As days went by, Peter became increasingly mean and violent. On a cultural day in school, he got a new Mustang and some of the most incredible music, but used this to oppress Annie. It was as if he had a special hatred for her and would do anything to talk her down, pull down her esteem, and abuse her. One day he insulted Annie so hard that Annie lost her temper and wanted to kick his ass. Immediately she stood to fight. Peter's friends rammed her up and shoved her into a support pole nearby. She screamed in pain, but still Peter laughed while kicking at her. Two of his best friends were accomplices. They joined in the laughter and kicked Annie in the butt, calling her hard rock butts. Annie was determined to report them to the police or authority. Peter brought out a short gun, pointed it below Annie's belt region, and told her that if she ever reported this incident to anyone, he would shoot her in the streets, and nothing would happen. One of his friends also grabbed a short dagger and made the same threats to her. The bully left Annie with bruises that day. At home, the poor Annie became increasingly solitary and always stayed private. Annie's father worried over her sudden change of attitude, but he didn't board her so much. He blamed her unusual calm on puberty and school stress. Peter got more hostile and increasingly dire over the past months went on. After the assaults, he made sure that he threatened her. "Don't tell on me or I will fucking shoot you and your haggard hair. Also, don't tell the authorities because I will know. If I know, I will be marked for danger." Annie's grades in school started to drop. She became increasingly scared of her environment because her tormentor ensured he never let her out of his sight. She was young, had not been exposed, and genuinely believed he would find out and murder her and her father. She stayed silent and tried to avoid him as much as possible. Over the past year, other close cliques of Peter made life unbearable for her. They didn't refer to her with her real name. They nicknamed her Scarface Jerry. This name started affecting Annie's self-esteem, and an increasing number of school students used these derogatory words to her whenever there was a quarrel. She is one of the poorest girls in the school, if not the poorest. Hence, she always stood out both in physical appearance and material wear. One fateful day, the Kingston High School students went for a picnic. A student affair unit organized the breeze, and unfortunately for Annie, Peter was in her group for the excursion. Some school students didn't know how to swim in the pool. Peter can swim very well, but Annie can't. After the break, everyone left the pool and went to the bar. Peter quietly called Annie to come to swim with him. Annie acts as if this bully has defeated her. She obeys almost everything he says to avoid trouble and more bullies. When Annie came closer to him, He told her that he wanted to make amends for all the bad things he had done to her. Annie naively thought her woes were ending and wondered what had changed his heart. Peter offered to teach her how to swim, to say he was sorry for bullying her over the year. Annie followed him to the pool. The other kids had drinks and pizza at the bar. Peter took Annie to the 6-feet-deep pool area and then told her to try not to reach the ground. She was petrified. Peter encouraged her to move her legs and hands in sync. She was afraid but didn't fidget because Peter had been taking her around the water for 10 minutes. Suddenly, Peter went underground and swam far away from Annie. At first, Annie didn't know what was happening, but became scared when Peter shouted "Scarface" from the other end of the water. Annie was on lifeguard, but she was terrified. She almost urinated on her pants. The bully then swam to her again and dragged the lifeguard off of her body this time. Annie started shouting. She was so scared and was drowning when one of the securities noticed something was off. The security woman jumped into the water and saved Annie from drowning. Peter faked as if he was getting soaked, and security kept him. He did this so that Annie wouldn't have allegations against him. It was a sad day for Annie when she thought her woes were about to end. She never knew his erratic behavior could be this tormenting and dangerous. The security guard escorted them out to the pool area and warned them never to enter the deep pool area without supervision. When Annie got home, she wanted to open up to her dad and tell him what has been happening for 1 year and 2 months. She's been going to school. The dad was happy about the picnic she went to, and she didn't want to disrupt his joy. Annie has always been very considerate, but she fears something might happen to her one day. She is also scared that if her dad gets to know what is happening, he will go head on with her bully, and this may get too serious that something dangerous might happen. Annie started getting depressed. The pool incident gave her nightmares, and she couldn't concentrate throughout the week. Day by day, he was making life miserable for her. 2 days after the pool incident, he keenly observed to see if she would report the incident to authorities. She didn't. In the afternoon, everyone went to the playground to play. Annie was absent-minded and walking across the flower area. Suddenly, someone karate kicked her from the side. The kicker turned out to be Peter. Without thinking, Annie caught hold of his ankle one-handed. She cupped it from underneath and held onto it so high that it couldn't go without tipping him over. Peter swung his fist at her but couldn't reach her. He didn't want to kick with the other leg because he knew if he did that, the legs would get outstretched and he would fall over. All he could do was hop and threaten Annie. Annie held his leg without saying a word. He threatened her with all sorts of dire consequences, but Annie didn't say a word. Instead, she stood her ground and held him. Students in that vicinity noticed what was happening and formed a circle around them. The students started laughing and laughing a lot. Everyone was happy because his many threats still fell on deaf ears. One of the teachers got a glimpse of what was happening and came there to separate them. After separating them, the teacher took the two to her office. When they got to the teacher's office, Peter started laying heaps of false testimonies against Annie, accusing her of being a bully who torments other kids in school. The teacher didn't believe these words because they had a report about Peter's erratic behaviors. Annie was sobbing and shedding tears and couldn't bring herself to say all the torment she had received from Peter since she entered the school. After a few minutes of crying, she got solace from the teacher's consolations and finally decided to open up. She told the teacher how Peter tried to drown her the day they went for a picnic, called her Scarface Jerry, and how he and his friends had made her life unbearable for her in school. The teacher was shocked to get these revelations. She hugged Annie and apologized on behalf of the school for negligence. The case was forwarded to the principal of the school. Peter was finally expelled from the school, and his crew of friends was given 2 months of suspensions each. 6 months after this incident, news speculated all over the internet about a boy waving a large handgun at police officers. He had crashed a car into the tree, jumping out yelling profanities, and waved a gun at the police officers that came to arrest him. The police warned him to drop the firearm, but he didn't. He kept threatening and yelling at them. He attempted to pull the trigger, so they shot at his arm and arrested him. He later died in the hospital from a gunshot injury. Annie was happy scared when she got this news. She was happy that her tormentor had met his Waterloo, but was scared because what if the bully had shot her as he attempted to shoot the police? In the following years, Annie graduated with flying colors, got a job with a famous company, and changed her family's socioeconomic status. The family moved out of the slum and rented an apartment not far from the capital. She got corrective plastic surgery on her face. At 29, Annie got her dad a Mercedes-Benz model car. She promised to care for him and make him as comfortable as any good daughter would. The joy was overloaded in this little family.
This was the second time little Hope had been betrayed, tossed aside, and unwanted. It was her own mother the first time it happened. What could a newborn baby do that was so wrong? Why was a healthy baby girl in an orphanage? Miss Ruth was the nanny of the orphanage, and even she could not justify what Hope's mother had done. Although Hope never experienced true parental love, she continued to hope that everything would get better in her life. Like everyone else in the orphanage, she dreamed that someday she would be loved and adopted into a nice family. She imagined herself as someone's daughter, at first subconsciously, and then her imagination became increasingly vivid. Throughout the years, other children were adopted from the orphanage, but no one wanted to make Hope part of their family. With each visit of potential parents, her dream of being adopted faded. After all, babies are more likely to be adopted, and she is already 10 years old. One day, there was a family who wanted to adopt Hope. She could not contain her joy. She thought, finally, she will be loved. However, it turned out that life outside the orphanage was not at all what Hope imagined it would be. She felt like an outsider in the world of her foster mother and her husband. Hope was treated like a piece of furniture, deprived of human care and love. The girl tried her best to be good, obedient, the way she needed to be. But her foster parents never responded how she wanted. Hope was ready to continue living with them, just to be part of the family, but her foster parents decided against keeping her. A year later, they decided they no longer needed Hope, and now the 11-year-old orphan was cast aside once again. Hope returned to the orphanage, unwanted and unloved. She began to wonder, will she be able to recover the deep betrayal she has experienced in life? Will she believe in the goodness of people again? Will she experience love? Hope looked out the window as her foster mother left, and big tears streamed down her face. Wiping them with her small palm, she did not understand why she had been abandoned twice already in her short life. Her own mother, who was supposed to love her, had betrayed her the first time. This time, when it seemed to Hope that life was improving, she thought she was going to have a real family. Hope's now former foster mother disappeared around the corner without even looking back, even once. Hope watched her leave, and with a sinking heart, she hoped that her foster mother would change her mind. "Don't worry, it's a part of life," said a familiar voice behind her. It was Mike, Hope's best friend. Mike was 3 years older than Hope, and, just like her, got into an orphanage in very early childhood, but there was a significant difference in his story, as Hope herself believed. His parents died, so he ended up in the orphanage. Clinging to Mike, Hope gave in to her emotions and cried as hard as she could. Mike ran his fingers through her hair in silence, letting her grieve. "You will cause a flood if you don't calm down, and then we will definitely get in trouble with Miss Ruth," Mike joked, gently wiping tears from her face. "Hope, don't be offended, but I'm sort of glad that it happened, because now we will be together like we were before," he said as he winked at her. Hope missed Mike while she was away, But she did not want to be reunited under these circumstances. This was her last chance to find a family, albeit a foster one. All children in the orphanage clearly understood that preferences given as a rule to young children under 5 years old. Teenagers are the least wanted. Hope was already 11 years old. She was already incredibly lucky to have been fostered a year ago, but her foster mother could not accept her, even though she tried her best to be loved. "Mike, you go. I need to be alone right now," she said quietly to her friend. He nodded understandingly and left. Hope lay down on the bed. There were no more tears. Now she felt only emptiness and indifference to everything. Reflecting on her life, Hope did not understand why some children got everything. Loving, caring parents, brothers and sisters, grandparents, holidays with big family gatherings, and other children got nothing except to live under the government's roof with strangers all around. Hope wondered how someone could give up their child and not think about them again. She didn't know the answer, but she hoped that her mother had a good reason for abandoning her and that they would meet again someday. One thing she knew for sure was that she would never give up her child. She would never want her child to experience what she had. When dinner service was called, Hope stayed in bed, staring at the ceiling. There was a soft knock on the door, and a moment later, Miss Ruth appeared in the doorway. When she saw Hope, she sat down on the edge of the bed and comforted her. "Baby, don't tear your soul out. It's not about you. You know there are people who come here like it's a toy store. First they take one, and then they throw it away when they get tired of it. I know that it's very painful and hurtful for you right now, but life goes on. We need to forgive and move on. There will be many more unpleasant moments in life, and you must be prepared for them," Miss Ruth said, voice trembling as she spoke. Miss Ruth barely held back her tears now. In general, she was an incredibly kind woman who treated all children with all her heart. She didn't have her own, so she gave them all the warmth, feeling sympathy for absolutely everyone. The children were also drawn to her and loved the eternally smiling woman very much. Hope looked at Miss Ruth and suddenly asked, "Miss Ruth, do you know the reason why my mom gave up on me?" "Does it matter, my dear?" Miss Ruth replied warily. "I just want to know. Maybe there is a reason. Maybe something happened that she made her want to give me up. You've been working here all your life. Do you remember how I got here?" Hope looked so optimistic that a shiver ran down Miss Ruth's spine. "Hope, honey, I'm sorry. I don't know the details," she said. She couldn't look Hope in the eyes as she remembered how she personally took baby Hope from her mother's arms, trying to dissuade her. But she did not want to listen to anything. Hope's mother could only say that the baby had ruined her life, but Miss Ruth would never tell Hope the truth. Hope noticed tears rolling from Miss Ruth's eyes. "Miss Ruth, are you crying?" "Don't, please," Hope said and hugged the woman. "How can I not cry? Because my soul aches for each of you," Miss Ruth replied. "But there are so many of us, and you have one soul. Let's both calm down and not cry anymore," Hope suggested. When Hope came downstairs for dinner, she spotted Mike coming toward her, and he whisked her around the room. Life in the orphanage continued for Hope. It was time to say goodbye to Mike, the best friend she ever had. Mike had turned 18, which meant that it was time for him to live an independent life. As expected, he received housing from the state and joined the army. He regularly wrote letters to his true love, Hope. Childhood friendship had gradually developed into a youthful infatuation, so everyone considered them a couple. After serving his contracted time, Mike had not forgotten about Hope. On the contrary, he regularly visited her. Hope anticipated his visits with a joyous heart because she had never been as close to someone as she was to Mike. Shortly before Hope graduated, the headmaster of the orphanage wanted to speak with her. Hope thought that it was about her finding a potential home, but she was mistaken. An unknown man was waiting for her in the office. "Hope, this man came on behalf of your grandmother," the manager, Mrs. Douglas, began carefully. "The woman does not have long left. She is in the hospital and would very much like to see you. Hope had a grandmother? But how was this possible? Hope was confused. If you agree to go to the hospital with me, you will find out for yourself, the man said. Hope nodded. Miss Ruth accompanied the pair, apprehensive about leaving Hope with an unknown man. Entering the ward, Hope saw an incredibly old woman who had medical tubes and devices connected all over her body. You wanted to see me? Hope asked quietly, carefully examining the woman. Are you Hope Mortence? The woman asked. Yes, Hope replied, but she was so confused. Call my lawyer, the woman ordered. Once her lawyer arrived, she continued the conversation. I'm your paternal grandmother. Unfortunately, my husband and son left too soon. Now it's my turn. You're the only one left in our family, so after I leave, I bequeath you everything I have, a big house and a decent bank account. All this will be issued in your name, the woman said as she motioned to her lawyer to present the official signed documents. She turned away from Hope to look out the window. Is that all? Hope wondered aloud. Trust me, it's not that small. Or did you want something else? The old woman said, grinning. You haven't seen me once in your life, and don't even want to ask how I lived, Hope said. I would like to know at least something from my life, Hope said indignantly. Okay, I'll tell you, but after that you'll leave right away. I'm already very tired, the woman said with irritation in her voice. When your mother found out she was expecting a baby, my son was only 22 years old. He wanted to get married, but I forbade him, threatening to deprive him of everything if he did. Your mother dreamed of marrying a rich guy, so when he left her, she decided to abandon you. She only needed you to get a goal. My son moved abroad and got married, but there were no children in that marriage. 5 years ago, he died in an accident with his wife. My husband died almost immediately after, suffering a heart attack. I found you, although it wasn't difficult at all. That's the whole story. Now go away. I sincerely feel sorry for you, Hope said through tears. You don't know what it means to love, because even now you are only worried about your money. After a long pause, Hope said goodbye and left the room. After Hope's graduation, Hope and Mike decided to live together in the same house that Hope had inherited. They decided to donate the money to the orphanage where they both grew up. As time passed, Hope and Mike got married and were looking forward to welcoming their first baby. Hope made lunch and escorted her husband back to work so she could get some fresh air. Suddenly, Hope ran into a strange woman at the gate. Can you tell me if Hope Mortence lives in this house? She asked Hope. She does. It's me. That's my maiden name. What did you want? Hope asked curiously. Looking into the woman's eyes, Hope had to suddenly catch her breath. She knew who was standing in front of her. My daughter! I finally found you! The woman screamed and rushed to hug Hope. Hope could not believe her eyes, but she invited her mother into the house. After pouring the tea into the cups, Hope sat down opposite her mother and asked, looking into her eyes, Why did you abandon me? Her mother replied, You see, daughter, your father left me when he found out that I was expecting a child. His mother insisted on it, and I didn't have anything to feed you. But let's not talk about the bad. We're together now. You know you have a younger brother, and he really wants to see you. Do you mind? Hope's mother asked. Yes, of course, I'll meet him, Hope replied absently. Hope had two thoughts on her mind at that moment. On the one hand, she was glad that her mother had found her, but on the other hand, it all seemed very strange. Hope's mother soon left, promising to come to visit next weekend, but with her brother. In the evening, Hope's husband returned from work, and she told him about the unexpected visit. You dreamed of finding your mom, and now you're not happy about it at all? Mike asked gently. Yes, I have replayed our meeting with her thousands of times in my head, but everything did not happen at all as I thought. She didn't even ask for forgiveness for leaving me, and didn't ask at all how I had been living all this time. The conversations were only about her and my brother, Hope replied sadly. Don't worry, let them come by this weekend. Let's try to find out what she needs and why she actually found you, Mike said. All week, the young woman suffered in anticipation of the unknown. She decided to invite Miss Ruth to dinner because Hope and Mike had continued to maintain a relationship with her over the years. When the weekend came, the doorbell rang, and Hope saw her mother and a young man who resembled Hope. Meet Nick, your brother. The woman introduced the young man. Nick gave the impression of a modest and shy guy and immediately liked Hope. Glancing at Miss Ruth, who was present at the table, her mother tensed and made a displeased look, which did not go unnoticed. And what is this woman doing here? Hope's mother asked, pointing to Miss Ruth. This woman was like a mother to us, sat with us when we were sick, calmed us down when we were sick, shared the joys with us, Mike quipped. Excuse me, how can I address you? He asked. Megan, Hope's mother hissed. Here, daughter, your brother will soon be studying near you, so you can see each other often. However, it's so expensive to rent an apartment. I'm afraid I won't be able to help. Maybe you'll take him in? We're not strangers, after all, trying to hold on direct eye contact, Megan said, looking at her daughter. Excuse me, Megan. I was wondering how you got your daughter's address, Miss Ruth asked. So the newspaper wrote that this house went to an unknown granddaughter of the former owners, Megan said, and stopped. And what is the age difference between Hope and Nick? Mike continued his questions. 2 years. Why? Megan's face turned crimson. Hope watched in silence. Because of the fact that 2 years after you abandoned Hope, you gave birth again. So you had housing and funds, but you didn't even think to return for your daughter. And I don't have to imagine that you were looking for her. You found out she had received a good inheritance and decided to get something out of it. That's clear. Stop playing games, Mike told her. And who are you to tell me off? Megan screamed. It's her brother. She has to help him. And anyway, if she hadn't been born to me, her life wouldn't have turned out differently, she persisted. Nick took his mother's arm and tried to lead her to the door, but she did not stop pouring insults at Hope. Tears rolled from Hope's eyes, so Miss Ruth hurried her into the bedroom and told her to sit on the bed. Why is she doing this to me? She doesn't need me at all, she whispered. Calm down, baby. It will be okay, Miss Ruth reassured her. When Mike finally managed to get the guests out of the house, Miss Ruth was already calling an ambulance. The stress of it all had caused Hope to go into labor. At the hospital, Hope gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. Hope looked into her daughter's face, realized that she would never be able to part with her. Hope cut Megan out of her life. Although she tried to establish contact several times, but Hope maintained a friendly relationship with her brother. Hope and Mike invited Miss Ruth to live with them and help with the baby, which Miss Ruth agreed to and was incredibly happy about. In the end, Hope and Mike became the best parents for their little girl. Rose was always sure not to jump to conclusions. One winter evening, she was returning home a little later than usual. It was snowing softly, and the ground temperature was cold enough for the snow to stick. Rose stopped, adjusting the fur hood on her coat, and overheard a conversation at the nearby bakery. Get out of here! I'm telling you, I won't give you anything, Rose heard someone inside the bakery say. Ma'am, I haven't eaten in a couple of days. I'd like hot water and a bun. It's cold, ma'am, said another voice outside the bakery. Rose followed the voices and saw a salesman chasing an unkempt man away from the shop. The man was hunched over and quietly begging for food. Rose waited until the man, who had a disappointed look on his face, left before she stepped into the bakery. Ma'am, give me some food, she ordered. Rose bought some pastries and hot tea. She left the shop and saw the man from earlier sitting on the frozen bench. He looked at her with such gratitude. "You know," he said as he drank his tea and started to warm up, "you're the first person in days to help me." He continued, "People are afraid of poverty, afraid to help. They avoid those who are different from them. I was rich. People would come to me and request things. But it so happened that I am here now. I'm eating the buns that you bought. So light, so kind. I see that you have had something nagging at you for a long time, but do not forget," the man winked. "Everything will be fine. You helped me and did not turn away at a difficult hour, and I will help you. Don't ask how, just help me now." Rose got up from the bench. She was so warm and good. The anxiety was gone. The man smiled again and stood too. "Farewell, my good fairy, and await good news for your kindness." Rose felt the man was telling the truth. Soon she understood it exactly. "Congratulations, it's a boy." This was the phrase John dreamed of hearing for 10 years. He and his wife wanted a baby, but it didn't work out. Today it happened, and John was the happiest man in the world. "When can I see my wife and son?" he asked the nurse. "You can come in now," the nurse replied. John walked into the hospital, but it felt like he had flown into it on wings of happiness and immense gratitude. "Rosie, I love you very much. Thank you for giving us a son." Rose was lying on the chair, and the baby was on her chest. She was crying with happiness. John bent down to kiss his newborn son and saw that he had a birthmark shaped like a tiny hand. "Rose," he said, holding the baby out toward Rose, "did you see?" Of course, she smiled. He didn't know how to ask or tell his wife that the baby had a birthmark on his forehead. "There's a spot on his forehead. Is that okay?" John said. "Birthmark at birth. Did you know they are a mark from God?" "Of course I did, but I didn't think my son would have that mark," John replied. "Does it bother you?" Rose asked. John was trying to find the right words, but he was distraught. "I like it," he said finally. "It's a peculiar speck like God touched his forehead with an ink pen. The doctors say it's a very rare mark and means our son will be brilliant and capable," Rose explained. "The doctors won't say anything to make Mom feel bad," thought John, but he didn't say anything aloud. "Do you have a problem with that?" "No, it's okay. Just out of the blue somehow. You know, I don't care where the birthmark is. For me, the main thing is that he is healthy in all respects. We have dreamed of a child for so many years, so who cares if he has a birthmark or not?" Rose said. John understood that his wife was right. It's not such a terrible defect that could interfere with the child's full life. He needs time to get used to it. "I'm sorry, you're right," he said to his wife. "I was a bit surprised. I didn't care if he had a birthmark. The important thing is that he's healthy, and so are you." He kissed his wife. "I'm going home to get ready for you and our son to come home. If you need anything, tell me, and I'll bring it to you." "No, I don't need anything, thank you. Now I have everything I wanted." 3 days later, John came to pick up Rose and his son from the hospital. There were no other visitors, and they decided to invite their family over once Mom and baby adapted to the new rhythm of life. Life was flowing in a different direction. The baby required a lot of attention and effort. Rose was very tired because, at age 37, it was challenging to become a mother for the first time. John helped his wife as much as he could, and he often got up in the middle of the night to give his wife a chance to sleep. After a week of adaptation, Rose invited over her best friend, Anna, who she planned to be her son's godmother. When Anna came bearing gifts for the newborn, she was genuinely happy for a friend who had waited so long for this happy moment in life. But when she saw the boy, she was surprised. "Rosie, what's that on his forehead?" Anna asked. "It's a birthmark," Rose answered calmly. "Can't you remove it?" Anna said. "Why?" Rose was genuinely surprised. "It doesn't bother me or John." "I don't know. It's going to grow as he does and become huge." Anna was trying to find the right words. It would be ugly, and the kids would tease him at school, you know? No, I don't. It all depends on how he treats this birthmark. If he likes it and thinks it's unique, he won't be afraid of being teased. I don't know. If it were my kid, I'd have it removed, Anna said. I'm sorry, but I'm not going to remove it for him. You can't do that, after all. It's not a wart. It's a birthmark. Birthmarks don't just appear on your body. Rose was offended. Let's wait until Adam's old enough to decide what's best for him. Rose was getting angry. She didn't want to talk about it. Anna noticed it and decided to finish her visit. I think I'll go. I have to go to the clinic, and I completely forgot. Run, of course. I have a lot of chores to do. I have to do my chores while Adam sleeps. Her friend left, but Rose still felt nasty in her soul. Why did she worry so much about this birthmark? It was quite small and looked fine. She seemed a little weird, thought Rose, and continued her business. There was a family visit planned for the weekend. Rose and John's parents, his sibling with his wife and daughter, and Rose's sister with her husband and children were due to come. She was looking forward to their arrival. She had a great relationship with her father-in-law and her brother-in-law, and she was always delighted to see them. Rose was on good terms with her family, at least until today. On Friday, John took a day off from work to babysit while Rose went shopping and prepared treats for her family. Unlike Rose, John was not so relaxed and was not particularly happy with his family. He knew perfectly well that relatives on both sides would ask many questions about his son's appearance. Knowing his relatives and his wife well, he was sure that no one would speak with caution. Everyone could afford to say exactly what they think about their families, so he wanted to prepare his wife for possible negative comments, but did not know how to do it. Rose came back from the store with huge bags and started cooking. Adam was sleeping well, and John decided this was the right time to talk. Rosie, are you ready for the next of kin? Of course. I'm looking forward to their arrival. I miss everyone, and we rarely see each other. Imagine how happy they are for us. His wife's benevolence and naivete always surprised John. He did not intend to re-educate his wife because he did not see the point. He was not sure of the effectiveness of the idea. In the morning, Rose woke at dawn. She was eager to show her little bundle of joy to the people closest to her. Rose's parents were the first to arrive. Even though they had become grandparents for the third time, they were pleased because the eldest daughter had 2 girls, so they had 2 granddaughters. Rose's father always wanted a grandson. The grandparents leaned over to his crib to see Adam sleeping peacefully as they entered the room. They immediately recoiled as if they had seen a wild animal instead of a child. Rose, what's that on his face? They asked. Birthmark, isn't it cute? Said Rose naively. The parents immediately left the room and headed for the kitchen. John was tense about the unpleasant conversation. Can it be removed? Asked his father. Why? Rose was genuinely surprised. Why, this is a nightmare. The child has such a mess on his face. Rose was in tears. John understood his wife's condition perfectly. She wanted her family to be happy with them, but it didn't work. It's not gross. It's God's mark, Dad, Rose cried. Look, why couldn't he have that mark on his back or some other part of his face? Her father said. Did I cause this? Rose wondered again. God blessed it. I didn't know my daughter was such a believer. Her father was surprised. You know, Dad, when you wait so long for a baby and ask for it from a higher power, you'll believe in everything and everyone. And what is the actual problem? You do not like your grandson? Her parents looked at each other. It was clear that they did not consider the grandson. They saw the birthmark and immediately left the nursery. I think I like it, she said. But her father said, not so much. We didn't get a good look at it. So, you got a good look at it, but not at the child? Rose started to get excited and the doorbell rang. Her sister and her husband and 2 daughters arrived. The girls were young, one 8 years old and the other 7. They immediately ran to look at their new cousin. No one told them he was so small and not to scream. Naturally, they woke Adam with their screams. John gestured to Rose that she should tend to the guests and that he would look after his son. Rose met her sister, who congratulated her younger sister on the long-awaited arrival of an heir and went to the nursery. She came out exactly 2 minutes later with the same look. Rose was getting angry. "I don't understand why you're unhappy. It's my kid, with or without birthmark. I don't care. I love him. I've waited 10 long years for him, and for John and me, the most important thing is that he's healthy." John's parents and brother and family came. First they hugged. They congratulated the young parents on the birth of their son, and then went to the nursery and rushed out of there, saying they did not want to wake the sleeping baby. But Rose saw that these cousins didn't like the mark on the baby's face either. John knew it was time to get into the conversation before his wife had a nervous breakdown. The family was in the kitchen, and the kids were sent to Rose and John's room, so the adults could talk privately. The family meeting was complete. "My dear family," said John solemnly, "we understand that you were surprised by the appearance of our son. Yeah, the guy has a birthmark on his forehead, but firstly, it's a tiny birthmark, and secondly, it's not a physical defect that could prevent him from fully living and developing. We sincerely do not understand your reaction and ask you to keep your emotions, especially your comments, to yourself." Everyone looked at John silently. Rose looked at her husband with great gratitude. John's father was the first to break the silence. "Guys, we're happy for you. We just didn't expect the boy to be born." He was thinking about how to word it. "To be born special." "Dad, a special baby is different. So that you know, Adam was born entirely healthy. Let's just change the subject." "Well, not unique, not like the others. Can you do plastic surgery to eliminate this defect?" And then John lost his nerve. "What defect?" he shouted. "I told you it's not a defect, just a birthmark. You have that on your back and your arm. Why didn't you do any plastic surgery? Fix these defects." "So it's on his back and hand, not on his face." His father doesn't want to give up. "I have a cosmetologist I know. I will talk to her and find out what can be done." Rose couldn't take it anymore. "That's it. I've had enough. Thank you all so much for the congratulations and the gifts, but that's it. We realized that you aren't pleased with his arrival. I am tired and I want to relax. Goodbye," she said and turned around and went to the nursery. John sent the guests away and went to his wife. Rose, of course, was crying, sitting by her son's crib. "Honey, don't listen to them. We'll see how happy they are with our Adam's achievements." John tried to calm his wife. "You know, I wish we hadn't invited them and kept them away from the baby. We've spoiled the mood." She leaned down to her crib and quietly said to her son, "I know for a fact that you're going to show everyone how smart you are, and they're going to be embarrassed by their poor attitude." Time passed, and Adam grew up. At age 15, he graduated as an extern and entered university. He knew 6 foreign languages, was a professional swimmer, and was the winner of many sports competitions and intellectual quizzes. His parents were happy. His whole extended family watched Adam's achievements with surprise. But the most exciting thing is that the birthmark on the boy's forehead, which so concerned all the relatives, remained tiny and was almost unnoticed under his haircut as he grew up. The story of Adam resembled the tale of the ugly duckling, and the result was the same. Now grandparents on both sides praised their only grandson and were proud of his success. John's parents were doubly pleased because the boy had carried on their family name. John and Rose looked at their loved ones and wondered how they could be such hypocrites. Now, not only did Adam's birthmark not alienate his kin, but it did draw attention to him. They didn't think they were like everyone else, so they told their parents to get rid of the mark. Adam is 16 years old today. Rose and John have decided not to have a sit-down with relatives, but to take the child they had long dreamed of to San Francisco. Sitting on the plane, John asked Adam if he regretted that his parents had not given him a real family celebration. "Dad, My family is you and Mom. It is clear that there are grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins, but I am more comfortable with you. I am fortunate that you were like that. Other kids have a complicated relationship with their parents and often complain about misunderstanding their relatives, Adam said. Yes, they unfortunately don't choose their family, John said thoughtfully. But it's not worth giving them up, my family. Rose looked at her son with adoration. After all, he is a brilliant child. Of course, my good man, I agree with you. This is your party, and you decide how it's going to be. And Dad and I will always be there for you. And we will always be there for you because parents have to support and protect their children in all situations. She thought for a second and went on. And from any attack. And said relatively quietly, even from close relatives.